All right, so now we check in with Sheng Peng from San Jose Hockey Now. How's it going? Seems like last week there was some things happening. Seems like there's going to be some things this week going to be happening.
Well, you would hope so with how the Sharks finished last year, that there is something happening this coming week, and it sounds like there are a number of things that may be happening.
Okay, so there was a Zoom call with Doug Wilson, and one of the things he mentioned was Hurdle, Eric Carlson, Logan Couture, all healthy, 100% good to go. Obviously, good news. But there's also been a lot of talk about Dubnyk being brought in along with Ryan Donato. Have you heard anything more in that regard?
Nothing extra than where we were kind of left at. I think the last significant report was from Pierre LeBrun, and LeBrun said very importantly that the Sharks were not on Dubnyk's no trade list. Dubnyk has a no trade list of 10 teams that Minnesota cannot send them to. And what's interesting about the Sharks not being on the list is that the Sharks are obviously one of the teams that this offseason are looking for goaltending. And so if Dubnyk did not want to come to San Jose, he could have very simply just put the Sharks on that list, because you could tell that the Sharks were a team that probably were looking for a goaltender. So it sounds like he is open to a move, and he must have known that he might have been, considering that he did not play any of the playoffs for Minnesota, that he, was somebody who might be asked to go somewhere. And so I think that is very interesting. And the Sharks are, of course, doing it right. They're letting, of course, Devan Dubnyk's wife had some serious health issues during this season. And so they're doing it right and letting Devan decide that if he wants to come or not. But it sounds like it is very much in his court what he wants to do. And it sounds like it probably will go through.
Really? So you don't even think they're kicking the tires on Lundqvist or Thomas Greiss?
Well, Grice they can't really talk to until free agency starts, and so they may want to solve this issue before then. They may not want to get into any kind of bidding kind of, I don't know, bidding war might be too strong a word for Thomas Grice, but get into bidding with for Grice. Also, too, I think that they may just simply have decided that Dubnyk is their guy, right?
You think that's being pushed from Nabby?
I would hope so. Who would you want, deciding the Sharks goaltender of the future? Do you want a defenseman in Doug Wilson, or do you want a goaltender in the Bakov, right? So I assume that, obviously it is Doug's final decision. He, the buck stops with him, but I'm like, and he said it in his pre-draft availability on Friday, and he mentioned that he's leaning on Nabby, and he's talked to Nabby a lot about it. So I think very much so. It's very much on the Bakov, and it should be too. He's the goaltending coach of the organization. And you mentioned the Lundqvist, and I think it's important to mention too that I don't believe that Lundqvist fits the profile of the goaltender that the Sharks are looking for. All the names that we've heard attached with the Sharks, whether from Pierre LeBrun or Elliot Freeman or Kevin Kurz, this offseason, we're talking Jake Allen, we're talking Darcy Kemper, Braden Holtby, James Reimer, Devan Dubnyk, right? These are all very recent number one goaltenders, all guys that, I think there's a belief that these guys can play 40, 50 games next season. And I don't know if there's a belief that Lundqvist is that guy anymore. I wrote an article a couple weeks ago suggesting that Lundqvist would be a good idea. And the reason why I suggested it was because some of his performance metrics suggest that he's still, average to above average. And because he was bought out, he probably wouldn't ask for a lot of money. And so that kind of makes sense. You sign a guy for, $1 million, $1.5 million. They perform like a starter, and that leaves you more money to fix other problem spots on your roster. And as we know, the Sharks have a lot of problem spots on their roster. And so that seemed sensible to me, but I've talked to a few scouts recently who have watched Lundqvist more recently than I have and more closely than I have. And they say that they feel like at this point, he is not a starter anymore. He is a backup. And the Sharks, I think, after considering how poorly Martin Jones has played overall the last couple of seasons, they clearly want better, at least insurance, in case Jones slips up again. They don't want to have a a true backup like I think Lundqvist is thought to be now, like an Aaron Dell. And full credit to Aaron Dell, who performed admirably last year. But they want somebody with a little more experience, with a little more of a ceiling, just in case.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
well, when he said that Lundqvist didn't fit the profile model, what does that mean? That he wants to win? No.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on with us, Sheng. Obviously, you're a good buddy of ours. We love chatting with you. There's something I wanted to circle back to. So, everything with Dubnyk and Donato and everything going on. I know Pierre LeBrun said it could be two separate deals.
Right.
I believe Michael Russo echoed a little bit as well. There's also obviously some chatter it could be the same deal. But let's just assume it's the same deal. Do you see this as a situation where Donato is being included as a sweetener to take on Dubnyk, or do you see it as a situation where the Sharks are more interested in Donato and, Bill Guerin, the Wild GM, is saying, well, if you want Donato, you got to take on Dubnyk. Do you get the impression that it's one way or the other, or is it just a matter of the Sharks like both players?
Yeah, I think it's closer to liking both players. I think they want Dubnyk.
Mhm.
I don't know why you would take on, why you would risk as important a position as goaltender, just to take on a, quote, not saying that you think this, but like a sweetener, like Dubnyk. Like you can't risk your goaltending position like that, especially for a guy in Donato who is a decent player, but he's a guy who was a fourth line player for Minnesota last year, who was scratched in the playoffs, and so that doesn't quite add up to me that we're going to we love this fourth line player and we'll take on your bad goalie contract and put our goaltending position at risk next season, when my job and my being Doug Wilson's job might be at risk next year. I think that despite Dubnyk's very poor season this year, and also there are some underlying metrics that suggest that he's actually been underperforming for the last 3 years. Despite these kind of markers, there's something about him that they like at his cost more than other guys of similar cost, whether it be Darcy Kemper. Well, Darcy Kemper will be more expensive in terms of what you had to trade for him. They want a first for Kemper, and I've heard they wanted 2 firsts, and that kind of tells you where their head is at. They want a lot for him, so they want at least 1 first for him. Guys like James Reimer, who might be comparable, in most people's eyes to a Dubnyk, but they like Dubnyk more, it seems like, or just whatever you think of out there. Even a guy like Holtby, who obviously has that Stanley Cup on his resume, but I think there's something about Dubnyk that they like a little more. A combination of potential play, high ceiling play, but also to his cost too. Because he had a clearly bad year this year. He is, his acquisition cost isn't as great as opposed to, let's say, last summer if you wanted to trade for Dubnyk or Donato. The acquisition cost would have been too great for the Sharks.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think especially I'm trying to look at it from an optimistic point of view, and I think given the numbers, I think maybe you could formulate an argument where it's, well, Dubnyk had a respectable save percentage the previous year, maybe less starts, he can get back to that. I mean, the age is obviously a consideration as well, but I'm kind of leaning towards, okay, maybe if he's starting, I don't know, let's say 30 to 35 games as opposed to, geez, I think he started 60 or 65 one year. So maybe they're thinking that's something that they can get out of him. Less starts might keep him fresher in the stretch run. I'm curious to know your take on Donato as well. He's somebody I kind of look at in the same light as a Dylan Gambrell, where he's got a lot of skill. And really, I think the best way for him to succeed is just to get him in a top 6 position where he's playing with guys who are a little more crafty offensively. Do you think, and again, this is all, hypothetical until it's official, of course, but let's say Ryan Donato does come to the San Jose Sharks. Do you see a scenario where maybe it's kind of like fuel to the fire and it's like, okay, you're going to play with Tomas Hertl on opening night? Or is it more of a depth situation?
Oh, well, first to mention about Dubnyk and his workload from 2014 to 2019, not including this year, but 14 to 19, Dubnyk started the second most games in the NHL, second only to Braden Holtby. So there he has played a lot of games in the last number of years. Anyway, about Donato, well, can Donato start the season with Tomas Hertl? Well, you had Daniil Yurtaikin as the top six forward to start last season. So I think that the competition may not be so fierce. But I don't mean to put Donato in that class. Donato is clearly a more talented player than Yurtaikin, at least Yurtaikin last year. And but I think Donato is also a more skilled player than a Gambrell type too. I think Donato is a guy that will be, if he is acquired, will be expected to come in and be a third line forward at worst. This is not one of those guys like a guy that is a fourth liner that you hope can play up. The expectation with him, even though in Minnesota, numbers games to some degree where he couldn't play up. Also, too, there are flaws in his game. He's obviously a very skilled player. He can put the puck in the net. He scored 14 goals this season, and just averaging 10 minutes a night. That's actually pretty good. So given the chance, he can score. But he does have flaws in his game. I spoke with a scout about Donato once those rumors started popping up, and I think the chief thing that this scout told me was that his compete level is not on par, at least for what this scout expected. He said that Donato is not brave. And so I assume that means a lot of, in terms of just going into the hard to play scoring areas, playing inside. The good thing about that, though, is that can be taught. A guy like Kevin Labanc is a good example of that. Even though Labanc and Donato aren't quite the same type of player, Labanc being more of a playmaker and Donato being more of a shooter. But I remember when Labanc was a rookie, and I was covering Vegas back then. And I remember a conversation I had with a scout then, and I showed him a clip of Ryan Reeves, actually, who had just been acquired by Vegas, steaming down on Labanc on a forecheck, and Labanc just sort of bailed. And that scout called Labanc a softie. And guys can learn how basically guys can learn to play inside, and Labanc did. And so Donato, a little bit older than Labanc was a couple of years ago. Of course, Donato's 24 now, but it's a good like Dubnyk. It's a good higher ceiling bet for the Sharks. Here's a guy that you expect to be able to play third line minutes, at least for this Sharks team that isn't very deep up front, and does have the ability to turn into a second line forward, perhaps.
Well, I mean, the Sharks, it seems, they got a solidified top four in Couture, Kane, Meyer, and Hertl. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering what those other two pieces are going to be that gets kind of fill in the blanks, if you will. Is there any other names?
The entire third line there too, so they have no third line. So.
Yeah, but those pieces are a little easier to come by, if you know what I mean. Not to mention the fact that I'm sure that, like last season, guys are going to be given opportunity to, solidify their position, whether it's Gambrell or Gregor or Shellman or whoever. I'm still surprised Nason hasn't been given something at this point. But, I mean, are there any other names, whether it's a Tyler Toffoli, whether it's taking a flyer on Bobby Ryan, somebody to fill out that top six?
Well, yeah, I think to spin off on what you said about, what the Sharks know they have at forward, their top four guys, and Kevin Labanc is up there too, to make it five, I think. But with their limited cap space, and this is where Sharks fans obviously need to temper their expectations. With their limited cap space, you're not bringing in surefire, top six guys like Taylor Hall. Maybe you bring in a Daninoff or a Toffoli, but just one of them. You're not bringing in both of them, right? And so that's one of those things where you need to take shots on guys like Donato, who are clearly talented, who are not making a lot of money, so you can fit them under the cap, and who, with a little bit of coaching, with a little bit of trust, maybe give them a little playing time, put them with the right people, you might be able to get that kind of similar-ish second, third line performance, but for a fraction of what a Toffoli will cost. Now, speaking of these other guys in terms of, who the Sharks might be interested, I've heard their name attached with Toffoli. I'm not sure if I buy it, just because I think Toffoli is a guy who really played himself into a larger contract after, he performed great with Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure if I'm seeing that the Sharks can really be able to fit him in what they, can afford. Right now they have about $14 million in cap space roughly. They have 3 forward spots that need to fill. They have 2 defensemen. Granted, they don't need to spend a lot on defensemen because they've obviously spent a lot already.
Yeah.
So they just need more like a bottom pairing guy and a 7th guy. So and then they need another goalie too. And so that's 14 million's a decent amount, but not for 6 players.
Yeah.
So
someone fetch me Eric Holla today.
yeah, exactly. So a guy like Holla, I think it could be interesting. A guy like Granlund, who has some who had some great years in Minnesota, did not do well in Nashville. There's a little potential there, or a little more of a mid-range guy like Jesper Foss. Not a great goal scorer, but terrific 2-way player. So guys like that could be maybe more realistic. I'm not sure, of course it'd be great to bring in a surefire, 20, 30 goal scorer like a Daninoff or a Toffoli, but it might be a little too expensive. Might not be the smartest play for the Sharks because, they need to fill out a lot of depth, a lot of spots. They need to fill out, like you mentioned, there's a top 6 question. There's entire third line, that's missing. And so you need to add those parts. So we'll see. Actually, we do have an article coming out. I think tomorrow, if not tomorrow, before free agency, where I do talk to the first couple of free agency articles I had. One was about buyout UFAs, and the other was about bargain UFA forwards.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of your dumpster dive guys. And so I have something coming out in a couple of days, talking to scouts about some of the premier guys like Gandanoff and Granlund and Craig Smith, and kind of gauging their fit with the Sharks.
Cool. So what you're telling me is we're not going to see Mike Hoffman or Connor McDavid in Teal.
Well, we're not going to see Mike Hoffman. I think there's a better chance of seeing Connor McDavid on this team than Mike Hoffman.
Well, finally here, before we let you go, we know that kind of the top 5 of the defense for the Sharks are set in stone between, Burns, Vlasic, Carlson, Schimmick, Ferraro, obviously Brendan Dillon, no longer with the team. I can't imagine that Brandon Davidson or Dalton Prout are here next season. So do the Sharks look at what they have in the pipeline, whether it's Jacob Middleton or obviously, so a guy that I rooted for a lot was Jeremy Waugh, and it sucks that he just couldn't, break through. So do you think it's a case of Kanajev? I'm going to butcher all these names with the exception of Merkley, of course.
No, you said that wrong too.
Huh?
I'm just kidding.
But like DeSimone or Brinson. See, I'm just going to say the first name.
That's safe.
So who do you think breaks through to be paired with Ferraro going forward? Because I just can't, with all those holes that you talked about between, getting somebody to backstop Jones and the fact that there's no third line, obviously they probably need to look inward to find that 6th, 7th guy.
Yeah, I'll say honestly myself too. I focus so much on the forwards during this time and the goaltending because those are the kind of the most acute needs for this team.
Mm-hmm.
But your number 6 defenseman is very important because that's a guy who's going to play, and that's guys who in theory is going to be paired with Mario Ferraro, who you think a lot of. So you don't want to just put him with the wrong guy. So I will have to look a little more into that. Guys that I have thought of, I might see Tim Heath coming back. He does useful things for the Sharks and or as an NHL player. He's not a great NHL player, but by any stretch. But I think he is a bottom pairing capable guy, and he'll be inexpensive, which is I think the key. The key thing there. Pasnichuk, and maybe I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he is definitely a guy that they think highly of, and I think there is a very good chance that he can start the season in the NHL. A guy like Merkley, I'm not as hopeful will necessarily start the season in the NHL. I think he'll need some time. I don't know unless he's had some kind of incredible off-season training that we don't know about. And we don't know about it because we're not really seeing these guys. You don't get to see them in dev camp or the rookie games and whatnot. But unless he had some kind of incredible training summer, I anticipate that he'll need time in the AHL to get used to playing a man's game. because he's not the sturdiest. He's a smaller guy. So I think he'll need some time, some seasoning in the AHL. But I think Pasnchuk has a good shot. I can see them signing a guy like a Heed or somebody in that kind of realm. I was thinking, and I don't know, Sharks fans won't like this guy so much, but I know he gets along well with Erik Karlsson, and so it makes sense that Borwicki might be somebody to look at, just in terms of he's going to be inexpensive. He's going to fill that role that they wanted Dalton Prout to fill, in terms of just a little bit of toughness and some PKing, that sort of thing, that unfortunately Prout couldn't fill because he had a couple concussions or this season. But he's a guy like that who can kind of fill a role for the Sharks potentially. And that's just an idea. That's not something necessarily that I've heard, and I haven't really chased down things about the defense because that's something that I don't know if the Sharks will fill immediately. Maybe they will, on the first day of free agency. But obviously the focus with them is on at forward.
Well, either way, right now, oh my God, I'm tongue-tied because it's like there's so much going on between now and the draft, free agent frenzy, so much happening. But thank you so much for joining us. Again, you can find Sheng, sanjoseshockeynow.com. And okay, I guess our final question, you don't have to answer. I mean, whether you want to confirm or deny, that's fine. There is rumor that Tim Heed has actually set his phone to block any numbers from the 408 area code. But we'll I don't know. Can you confirm or deny that, or is that really? That's hockey jerk? Go ahead, jerk. Tell him.
No, we have and we obviously AJ, myself, pretty much everybody who's affiliated with Teal Town, we all are very much in love with Tim Heed. It kind of one of those guys where you watch him with the Barracuda, you watch him mature up to being in the NHL. And so he's just, I would say, if we did a ranking of maybe not the best Sharks or, the most skilled Sharks, but maybe just like those guys that we always love and root for, Tim Heed's definitely up there. And so we always kind of, because of that, we want him, to kind of succeed, get a better, maybe an opportunity where maybe he's not an extra defenseman, maybe he is solidified in that bottom pair. So, AJ and I always just joke around. It's like, if a 408 area code calls him, I would just ignore it and go somewhere else. So kind of our joke.
I see. Yeah. So I think that it's possible. I'm not sure if he's the type he's looking for, which is true. Under DeBoer and Buchner, it never seemed like he was the type they're looking for, especially with already you have guys like Burns and Karlsson filling that kind of offensive kind of, and those two are so good at it, Whereas a guy like Heed at the NHL level, he's just a decent offensive defenseman and doesn't necessarily make up for his defensive shortcomings. So I just threw his name out because he is familiar to them and he will be cheap. But I'm not really sure. And one guy you did mention that I forgot to mention is I know that Middleton. I reached out to some people, of a source, and he wants to come back. He's hopeful that the Sharks want him back. That's what from a couple weeks ago. But I don't know where that's at now. And actually, I do need to follow up on some of these RFAs and whatnot right before we start. And so I'll have an update on that, I'm sure, in a couple of days or so.
Awesome. Well, Sheng, get on that, and we'll see you on sanjoseshockeynow.com this coming week. Thanks for joining us, man.
All right. Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me.